Thank you for coming along on this Devo series called All the Voices. We're unpacking John chapter 10, and we've already looked at how it says that Jesus is the gate. Now the gate's wide open, whereas it had been closed due to sin in the garden. The shepherd knows us by name, and this third point is the question, are you listening? John 10:3 says the shepherd opens the gate for his sheep. They listen to his voice. And we've already established that the sheep pen, where the shepherd resides, he knows the sheep by name. Can I say that enough? And now he opens the gate and asks us and says that we will listen to his voice. So it's one thing to realize that Jesus is the only way, and it's another thing to hear him call our name in the middle of the night and recognize his voice. But it's another thing to actually listen, especially when there are so many voices speaking. Let's say, for instance, we know God, we feel loved by him, but we begin to start listening to all other voices except God. I'll use my own life as an example. In one given day, I might listen to whispers about my worth and identity in the morning and start doubting the Father's love when I look in the mirror. I leave the house and tune into a podcast that speaks about everything environmentally dangerous, and before long I might start worrying and fearing about my surroundings and possible dangers and toxins in my home. In the afternoon, maybe I've prayed to the Lord to open a door, and I wonder if God's even listening to my prayer because it's not opening. And you can see that before the afternoon has even begun, voices have swirled, literally climbed up on the rocks and yelled at this little sheep quaking in her hoofs until I choose to settle myself and listen. So what does listening to the shepherd's voice even look like, and how does it settle our weary minds and souls? If you've ever taken a swim in the sea of voices on any given day. Exodus 3 is a familiar story of Moses and the burning bush. It's different yet similar to the story of Samuel. It's similar because God calls Moses by name, just like he did Samuel. And it's different because Moses answers right away, "Here I am." So let's look at the circumstances in this story and ask ourselves, are we listening like Moses did? Verse 2 says an angel appeared in a flaming bush, but the bush wasn't consumed. This was certainly a curious sight to Moses, so he went to check it out, why it wasn't burning up. And it doesn't say he even saw the angel. It says that when Moses went to look at the bush, a voice called to him, and Moses said, "Here I am." Have you ever seen a bush on fire that's not being consumed? I have not. And some debate that bush wasn't actually on fire, that was just the presence of God, and others have discovered that there really is a bush that can catch on fire and not burn up. But debating over that issue is veering from hearing God's voice in this story. Look at what Moses did when he saw the burning bush. He stopped what he was doing, he went over to investigate, and look what God did when Moses came. He spoke. And then Moses listened. I'm going to climb out on a limb here, no pun intended, on this bush story. When I think of something burning and not being consumed, I think of people that are in extreme hardship, in the fire, so to speak, through illness or loss or trouble, and yet their faith burns strong. I have many friends in my circle just like that at this moment. The heat of the day is strong, flames are high in their house, and yet these folks still talk of their faith, how good God is, and even give to others when they themselves are in need. That sort of on-fire person gets my attention. That's a burning bush. And I have this choice to sit at home and observe all the fires licking at the heels of my friend and raise a fist to God and ask him why and turn away, choosing to believe that those hardships and fires equal lack of attention by God. Or I can do as Moses did and observe a little closer and see what's making these people burn and yet stand strong and firm and not be consumed. It's worth observing and reading about those who are burning and yet not consumed. I once read a book about women that were persecuted for their faith, and I'll never forget one woman's particular comments. She said she had heard the good news of how Jesus gave his life for her, so she counted it a privilege to suffer for him, a privilege and an honor. That's a bush on fire that's not consumed, and it caught my attention. Moses turned aside to see what enabled that bush to stand, and God saw that Moses' ears were turned to hear God's voice. And we know that in that conversation, from Moses listening to God, it changed the course of history forever. It was there that God spoke to Moses to lead an entire nation out of bondage, and he told him, "I will go with you." Listen to his voice throughout the lives of those you know that are on fire in the middle of a storm, and yet their faith burns strong. Don't always hang out with friends that are climbing the ladder of success to find out how they made it to the next rung. Sit with the friend whose ladder broke in a million pieces, and yet that friend is praising God for all things and finding time to encourage you. God speaks in a million different ways, but his voice is often the strongest in the middle of the burn, the kind that cannot defeat the love that resides in the heart of the one on fire. He's opening the gate and he's inviting us to listen, but we might have to turn aside and become curious instead of furious. If a friend is in the fire and it seems like they are being consumed, then we can be the fire that provides cover for them. But if they're the friend that's shining brightly and we stand amazed, it's worth turning aside to hear God's voice out of the fire, because he might be speaking something life-changing and world-changing if we say, "Here I am."